COO of the National Association of Theater Owners. Welcome to the show, Lou.
Thank you, Lucas. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit more, Lou, about yourself and NATO. Is it, you refer to it as NATO?
We actually refer to ourselves as NATO.
NATO.
So
that's
a lot of
but we'll get into that maybe later. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
For better or worse. Well, tell us a little bit more about NATO, the association.
Yep.
And yourself.
Yes. So NATO, we represent companies that own movie theaters. So that ranges from the biggest chains, AMC, Regal, Cinemark, down to companies that have one screen. We have about 800 members all over the U.S., about 100 countries. So we are in the movie business, and it is for me the biggest passion of my life is movies. So coming to this job was such a wonderful thing for me. I've been loving every second of it.
Great. Did you have that background before you joined NATO?
I did, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
I did. So this is, the Infinity Saga Marvel. This is not just passionate for me, but my son as well. He is also a huge movie fan. We've seen every one of those movies, so it's been a big thing for us. So that was a gift, and I love that, and it makes me happy every time I look at it.
That's wonderful. I, too, have gone to several of those movies in the theater with my son, so happy to support your members and get some great entertainment. I, too. It's a great series, and he's into it. He's probably watched them all at least twice and couldn't get enough of that. So. Well, how did you find this world of associations? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was on purpose, but I am actually
you'd be the first.
Right. I'm a failed politician. I know there's lots of failed other professions that ended up here. I went to school thinking I was going to go into politics. And when I was in high school, I participated in a nonprofit program called Presidential Classroom that brought students, high school students, to Washington, D.C. to teach them about the government. And I was hooked. I thought that's what I was going to do. After I graduated college, I had the opportunity to work at Presidential Classroom. So it was a nonprofit that was based around civic education and government, which I thought was great and would lead to a career in government. And after several years, I realized that I really loved the nonprofit side of things and not as much the government side of things. So that steered me into that direction. And then from there, once I started looking at the opportunities that were available in the nonprofit space, all these different interests that I had, there were opportunities there. So that led me to my job at Math Counts after that. And that's a math-based nonprofit. Went to work for a group called DECA, which is a marketing education program for high school students. Then Colorectal Cancer Alliance, which is a nonprofit around colon cancer, which my mom is a colon cancer survivor, which was something very personal to me. And now here at NATO. So very different interests of mine, but all organizations doing great work. And I had a passion and interest in what they were doing. And it's just been an awesome ride.
Was it something, looking back, that deterred you away from government, or was it more a draw into the nonprofit, or both? What made you make this?
Yeah. So actually, I do have a moment that I remember. So we were bringing students to DC to teach them about the government, and I remember doing this when I was in high school, and this was a really impactful thing for me, going to the Capitol and being inspired. And it was actually in the middle of the Clinton impeachment hearing. And we brought students that day, and it was just, I don't know that it was an inspiring day on the Hill. And it was a very, just had a very different experience. And I was like, man, this is going in a direction. And, it's obviously gone, I think, even more fractured and a lot more challenging up there right now. So I'm very happy with the choice that I made and the career path that I'm in right now.
Excellent. Well, you had mentioned sort of before the show, your son's off to school. Is he going the government track or the nonprofit track, or does he know? Because it's okay not to know. I don't think I knew specifically. Actually, I did know, but I ended up going almost in the opposite direction.
Yeah. So for now, his intention is to become a defense attorney. So that's what he wants to do. It would be awesome if he did that. I totally support him. But I also know that I know a lot of people who started off when I was in college that wanted to be lawyers, and they ended up doing lots of different things. So, nothing is set in stone at this point. I keep telling them, keep your options open, and you can end up anywhere.
even our point, I would suggest. Nothing's final. You don't have to stick with anything.
Yeah.
A lot of folks can turn completely left and go a different direction. It's not too late.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
Maybe back to government, Lou. Maybe we could use you there.
We
don't have to.
I know. maybe someday, but no, I'll tell you, this association has just been so, again, it's just been so fun for me. I mean, that's what's great about the association world. One of the questions is why associations, right? And it really does allow you to do the same type of work, but in such different fields. My dad, his entire career, he was a banker and worked for different banks, but basically he's doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Again, to go from colon cancer to movies, and obviously before that math, it's interesting. Whenever you tell people where you work, what association you work for, conversation goes from there. And, when I worked at a group called Math Counts, everybody would tell me about what math experiences they had. Usually they hated math. Some people said they loved math, but it was conversation about, math. I worked for the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. So when that would come up, people would tell me about their colonoscopies, which is good. We want people to talk about that, right? But it's a topic. It is. So now when I tell people what I do, I get to talk about their movies. What movies did they go to? What's their favorite movie? And that's a conversation I would have had anyway. So that's why one of the reasons why I just love being here.
Well, I do want to come back to the movies because that is a fun one. And I think it's still making a great journey in the rightward direction, if you will.
Yes.
Sort of its growth. But, looking back, because you have sort of had a more diversified run through associations in different positions and different roles. And, what are sort of some of the common trends? Because it's not colorectal cancer to movies and around that. I wouldn't call that a common theme. It's not like you've stayed in medicine, for example, but what's your experience? Tell us a little bit more about, what's similar and what is different.
Yeah. Well, I think at its core, this is all collaborative work, right? You're work in associations, in nonprofits. You have your board made up of dedicated individuals who are passionate about the topic, whether it's colon cancer or movies or math. And, you are working within that nonprofit framework of a board with a staff, separation of duties, and people really trying to maximize the impact that the organization has on whatever the mission is. And I think that's the common thread. And I think if you there's pros and cons to working in this space where you have a board that you're working with and you have volunteers. If you don't like it, you will not succeed in this world, right? You have to be okay understanding that people will come at this with very different perspectives. And if you see that as a source of strength, then you're in the right place. Then the association world's right for you. If you'd rather just do your own thing and you feel very confident your solutions are right on your own, then that's great too. No judgment, but you're not going to thrive in the association world.
Yeah, it is. Some people can be mixed, to your point, good or bad on sort of the theory or philosophy of rule by committee, right? Whether you think that's a good thing or bad thing, but what has been some of those more positive aspects? I mean, you said there's pros and there's cons. What are some of the pros that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that old saying, right? All of us are smarter than one of us. So, when you have these really challenging problems, and I'll give you just a handful, right? So when we were at Math Counts, one of our biggest challenges every year, because Math Counts, it's a program that's focused on middle school mathematics, and we had a math competition, and it's really popular. It's millions of students have participated in it, and every year the biggest feedback we'd get on it, the biggest complaint was that the math problems on the competition were too hard. That was always the number one problem. The number two problem every year.
Who didn't come in first place, yes.
Yes. The number two problem every year was the problems are too easy. Those were the two biggest complaints, right? It was too hard and it was too easy. So what do you do, right? That's a really challenging problem when they seem to be at odds with each other. When at the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, our biggest issue was we had a limited amount of resources. Yeah. Colon cancer, unlike other cancers, is actually entirely, you can eradicate it without finding a cure because it's entirely preventable. It's one of the few cancers where if you get screened early enough, you can catch it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? Do you invest your money in trying to find a cure, or in trying to get everyone screened early enough to make a cure unnecessary? Really hard, fascinating question.
Yeah.
And these sorts of issues, these are really interesting problems to solve. And it takes a lot of brain power to do it. So, going into any of these and saying, I'm going to have the one right solution for this, and my answer is right, and there's only one way to do this, I think that's the wrong approach. I think when you have these really complex problems, you need as big a team as you can get to try to dive into it and try to find the right answers and do the best you can. And that's what we did at those organizations. And I think we made great ground on both of those areas due to the collaborative nature of the work.
That's probably one of the best examples of a nonprofit or an association problem where it's not a math problem, right? There isn't an answer that is definitively like you can solve it in every case. I mean, you really have two very broad different directions and approaches to how a community, I'll call it, has to move forward towards a solution, right? And there are these two bodies, and how do you juggle that, or what are some of the ways that you all hold the audience or use that collective brain power to help steer the answer or at least steer the resources of your group? That's
right. That's absolutely right. And it's resource allocation, right? I mean, it's because in this world, I haven't had the fortune to work at a nonprofit that was so flush with money that we could just waste it, right? Like we have to be very smart about the limited resources that we have, whether that's money, whether that's time, people, and again, that's takes a lot of strategic intent in use of those resources to get the best return that you can, and that's how we're successful.
Yeah. I in looking through sort of your LinkedIn and your history, a lot of the things that I observed you doing at these different organizations were focused around, I'll call progress, but I think it's also could be described as growth within those organizations, which I know I work with a lot of associations. Not all of them grow, but I also am pretty adamant about the statement that healthy things grow. And so talk to us a little bit about your approach to growth and why growth is important.
Yeah. So, from a philosophical perspective, I believe change is not just a good thing. It's a necessary thing. It's happening whether we want it to or not. So the question is, how do you intelligently steer that change in the most productive direction? And by focusing entirely on the mission, right? Just trying the same solution over and over and over again will only get you so far. It's, how do you think bigger to really achieve what, most associations and nonprofits have very audacious missions. These are not small statements if you look at in our world here. So sometimes it is just very helpful to get a fresh set of eyes on it. And think about this, the problem in a different way. I'll give you an example. When I went to Math Counts, like I said, this is a middle school-based math program, and the goal was the mission was to get more middle school students engaged in extracurricular math. So certainly there are math classes. Everybody has to take math class, but the benefit of doing extracurricular math was clear. So how do you get more kids into it? And at the time, the biggest way that they did that was through this math competition, which was a huge success. Again, millions of kids have done it. Absolutely life-changing for the kids who have gone through that program. But, when I first took over there as executive director, one of the things that questions I had asked, it was a simple question: do we have to just do a competition program? Now, that seems like a logical question, but the competition program was so successful for so long, and the growth was so exponential that why focus on anything else, right? It had just been, the organization's focus had been on maximizing that one really amazing program. But once phrased in that way, everyone said, hey, wait a minute, you know what? Maybe we don't have to just do one thing. So that led to the creation of the National Math Club. And what's great about the National Math Club was that was a program where there was no competitive element, but it was still extracurricular math. It was kids getting together for games and fun math activities after school. Nobody was judged if they got a problem wrong. It was just participation based. And it appealed to a very different group of students and teachers. And that also had exponential growth. There's been millions of kids that have gone through that program. And it's something I'm really proud about, because it's, it was the willingness of the organization, even though they were very successful in what we were doing, to look and say, let's try something very, very different. And that led to great results. And I think that has inspired me in all my other stops since then to want to say, what are these underlying assumptions that we have here that maybe we can question? What can we do to help take things in different directions? And that's been something I've really enjoyed doing, and helping organizations that I work at, trying to find new ways to do things, innovate, and hopefully better achieve our missions.
Yeah, I love that. In our annual meetings, at the beginning, we have a few things that we write on the board, and one of them is all growth ends. And so it flies in the face a little bit of, if it's, if we just metaphor the thing to death, if it's not broken, why fix it? But it's going to break, right? And so you have to look forward enough to say, or maybe this isn't going to break anytime soon, but what else could we do to advance the mission? This and. And I really like this idea of, just sort of pushing the envelope for the sake of the mission, not just to fix something, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so many good examples of that. We just had one at NATO. We put on a event called CinemaCon every year, every April. Wildly tremendous event. It's been going on for years now. And the point of that program is to bring the movie studios together with the movie theater owners so they can talk about their movies that they have coming out for the rest of the year, get people excited, have, great conversations among those groups, but also allows the movie theater owners to plan their year, right? To see what's coming down the pipeline, so they can make decisions about what they want to show in their theaters. And rightfully so, the focus of that event, I think, has been, the excitement there is around the studio presentations. It's a very big part of what makes CinemaCon so special. When you have movie stars coming in and you're seeing these, trailers and clips from movies that aren't released yet, it's a really awesome, fun thing to do. But one of the things that we did this past year was to say, look, there's movie stars, but how do we make our exhibitors the stars at this event? How do we really focus on our members? Because it's easy for the theater owners to get, sort of second billing when you have, celebrities on stage. And we made a real concerted effort this past year. We did a movie, we made a series of films called Behind the Screens, Faces of Exhibition, where we did deep dive videos on different movie theater owners, employees, and showed what their lives were like, the jobs that they were doing. And we showed those videos on the same stage that we showed trailers for things like Deadpool and Wicked. And the reaction was really, really impactful. Our members loved it. And it really, from an impact perspective, for them to feel like, again, they were stars in the same way that someone like Dwayne Johnson, who was also there, to share that stage. I think it was a really impactful moment for our members. And it's exciting when you see an innovation like that and a good idea actually turn into, good execution and a successful result. Doesn't always work that way, but, in this case it did. So we're really proud of that. We're going to continue to do it at next year's event and keep progressing. That's what we're trying to do. That's a great story. And that's a great program, both for the members and just the community, the industry as a whole. Well done.
Yeah.
Do you have, again, you've sort of embarked on a few different areas within the association space. And I won't say, could you go back and tell your former self something that would, shake the young association professional, but what's something that you sort of learned along the way that, for maybe younger viewers or folks that are just getting into this industry, sort of some advice for them based on real life examples, observations?
If I could go back and talk to my younger self, really, really impress upon that culture is so important, and you cannot overcome a culture that's not working by wishing for it, right? Like it's a really big thing. And, it's smart to listen to the culture that they have, and an organization whose culture is not about change and not about innovation. And maybe their culture is about, respecting the old traditions, no matter what. Like, okay, fine, right? Who's to judge, right? Who's to say whether that's good or bad? You have to understand who you are, and you have to understand the culture of the organization that you're working for. And if there's a mismatch there, you're not going to be happy. And if there's a mismatch in what you want to accomplish and the the direction that the culture is taking the organization, again, you're not going to be happy. So I would definitely say it's really important to understand where the culture is, what drives the organization, and then make sure that you're in the right place. And if you're not, there's other great places to go, right? That's the wonderful thing about our industry. So many great associations doing great work. You can always find some place that does align with your personal culture and your personal values.
That's very well said. And in addition to that, I was just introduced to two new concepts. One is fair process, and the other is intangible capital, and they go along together. And so what I've learned about fair process is, if you want to motivate growth within the culture, which we do, we're growth-minded organizations over here as well, just like yourself, you have to involve everybody in the process of making the decisions of what the growth looks like. Because without that, people move forward with hesitation. They're not engaged. They even question or will buck the process at with. So before you can get to the what, you have to explain the why. And then if you do that within a culture, that's how you can produce what they would call intangible capital, which is essentially a unified team that's motivated. And a unified team that's motivated behind a cause will move exponentially faster and will go exponentially farther than one that's not. In fact, the one that's not and doesn't understand sort of the why of the mission could come to a grinding halt.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said, but I think there's a secret ingredient that's required for all of that to work, and that's trust. Because what you just said about having a process where everybody participates in it, if you're going to have a process like that, there's naturally going to be points of disagreement. And if you have trust that everybody is, operating in good faith, they're making points from an honest place, and that everybody is doing their best and bringing their best to the organization, then when a decision is made that maybe runs counter to your personal opinion, you're able to say, you know what, we had a disagreement. There's lots of different sides to this. I trust that we have really smart people around the table here. So I would have gone with option A. The group said option B. I trust that we have a good group in place here. I'm going to get behind option B, and we're going to make this awesome. And if you have that, that leads to the intangible capital that you talked about, right? Because that allows you to move and make progress. If you have a process where you don't have that trust and people don't, let it go, right? They're stuck because they feel that their decision was the right way to go, and they don't trust that a process worked in the right way. Then you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And trust is something, as you know, it builds over time, and not everybody that's going to be in the room as you're building towards and explaining the why and rolling out, working towards the what and how will you have known for a decade plus, and we'll just kind of know how you naturally and instinctively sort of get behind the notion that you're intrinsically doing this in the best interest of the organization. So,
right.
It's very difficult, and without the trust, you're right, and it's an important key. It's probably the most important key, I think.
Yeah, as leaders, that should be your absolute objective. The minute you walk in the door, is building trust, because the old saying, you build trust in drops and you lose it in buckets. So you have to start putting drops into the bucket the minute you walk in the door. And it's very easy to lose trust. Very easy for staff, volunteers to look at actions and say, okay, I don't trust what you're doing. I don't trust the position you're coming from, and that's devastating. You'll never accomplish anything that way.
Yeah, and it extends to members.
Correct.
And so how do you build trust with the membership, and specifically NATO or you, Lou, or with previous organizations? Do you have an example or two of things that you've proactively implemented to sort of help build that trust?
Yeah, I think communication is key, right? Because, understanding that when you have a disagreement like that, to say, whether that's an internal staff thing, whether it's with members, whether it's with the board, to say, okay, let's communicate about an issue that we're having here. We want to hear everybody, so let's communicate. You tell us, your side of this issue. Let's try to put all the sides on the table and go through them. Okay, here's the difficult situation that we face. We've all talked about it. Here's what we're going to do moving forward, and you share the why behind that. It doesn't mean people. I've said that to every staff member I've worked with. You can always ask me why a decision was made. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it or I have to agree with you, but you can always ask me why. There should always be a why that you're explaining. Here's why we did what we did, because that helps to build trust. And then communicate that far and wide, because if you don't, people fill in their own whys, right? That why you did something, they fill in the gaps, and maybe not in a way that's beneficial to you. So I think that's the most important way. You have to get ahead of it, communicate, be clear in your decision-making process. Foster an environment where people can ask why. Because if people feel stifled or scared to ask questions, then again, they fill in the gaps with their own narratives, and that doesn't always help.
I think you hit something that's really important, is when most people can land on the communication of building trust, they think of that as, well, we're just going to tell them what we're going to do and why over and over and over again in this attempt to over communicate, which isn't really a thing. You just communicate a lot. There's no over implies that you did it too much. I just don't think that's possible. But the second step is then allowing people to ask questions back, and question to a degree, because that's where there might be a level deeper of understanding that you didn't capture in the first 8 rounds of communication, however many you're pushing out, right?
100%. Communicate is two-way, right? Communicating is conveying and listening. If you're just talking all the time, you're not communicating.
Yeah. Well, Lou, how about we switch gears on a couple of fun questions?
Sure.
What's something that you look forward to every year, right? January 1st, it's on the calendar first and foremost.
Man, so I'll tell you, before I worked at NATO, I would always share this. It's our family's Oscar pool. This is a very big deal. So we've been doing it for 20 years, and it's bragging rights are very, very big in this. I did win last year, so I have to brag about that right now. But since that's something that's NATO focused and job focused, I'll give you something else. My son and I are huge Formula One fans, so we are very excited every year in February, March when the new cars come out to see how our team's going to do. So that's it's like waiting for Christmas to see how things shook out. And then the rest of the year is fun too, but I think it's really exciting at the beginning of the year to see how the teams created their cars for the year.
Well, I'm curious around the structure of the Oscar competition or the Oscar pool, if you're willing to share.
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty simple. It's just, you can find them online, Oscar pool, you pick the categories, whoever, as many of the winners as you can, and whoever picks the most wins the pool. NATO, actually, we started our own office pool this year. So that was something I was excited about. It wasn't my idea, but I was a very enthusiastic participant in it. I did not win the NATO pool this year. It's a little tougher when, there's a lot of movie fans in that group. And I had a good showing, but man, it was a tough competition this year. So
that sounds like a fun culture in and of itself. And the Formula One stuff, I mean, it's coming on fast, no pun intended, but it really is. It's picking up all over the U.S. I hear people talking about it. I haven't yet to go to a race, but I'm told, you got to put it on the list.
It's amazing. They have them Austin, Miami, Las Vegas. We just went to the one in Montreal a few weeks ago, which was awesome. And then as a combination of two of my biggest passions, Formula One will have a movie next year with Brad Pitt next June. They just announced the date for that. So very excited about the Formula One movie.
Lou, are you able to pick a favorite upcoming movie? Is that or is that off limits? Is that going to be?
Oh, yeah. Well, upcoming. I mean, look, I'm very excited about Deadpool coming out in a couple of weeks. I'm excited because my son is now 18. We went to all of these Marvel movies that are on the poster behind me.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't take him to Deadpool when it first came out. It probably not appropriate for him at the time. It was rated R, but now that he's 18, obviously it's fine. So I'm excited that we will get to enjoy a different type of Marvel movie together now that he's old enough to do so.
There you go.
Yeah.
What about something that is not online about Lou? Something we couldn't find in your resume. We couldn't Google this because you can Google a lot these days, but it just wouldn't be found.
Wow. Well, I don't. It might be online, but it's something that I think is really cool. When I was at Math Counts, one of the things that we did is we did a successful Guinness World Record attempt. So I'm a Guinness World Record holder.
Oh wow!
Among a group of 324 other people, we assembled the world's fastest human compilation of Pascal's triangle, which is a math pattern. It's a row, so it's one number, then two numbers, and three numbers, and four numbers. It forms a pyramid, and everybody was given a number, and we had to align in this big triangle in a big hotel ballroom. We had the Guinness adjudicator out there. And it sounds like, well, you know, what was the record before? Well, there was no record before. We were the first ones to do it. But Guinness doesn't allow you just to say, well, if no one did it before, you know, if you do it once, you get the record. They will say, okay, in order for us to put this in the book, you have to beat a certain time. So it was very stressful because we had a lot of students who were excited about that. It was people who were participating in our math programs. We brought them down. So it was mostly kids and math teachers. And we did it. So that was super exciting. And the Guinness World Record certificate is framed in my house. We did this. My son, I think, was 8 at the time, and he was very into the Guinness World Record books from the library. He'd always take them out.
Of course.
So I was like a Superman when I got to, you know, come home with a Guinness World Record certificate. So that was definitely one of the coolest things I've got to do in my career.
Yeah, that's very cool. My son, went through a dude perfect phase where, but those were his favorites, were when they tried to set the Guinness Book of World Records stuff, specifically in basketball, because he's a basketball player. And so I have an appreciation for this because they don't always get them. And you see them now on, what is it? America's Got Talent. They have people that go on there and try to break the record. I don't know that I've ever seen one do it in front of a big studio audience. Maybe it's just the pressure of all that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure there because, and look, there's a cost to it. There's a lot of time that goes into it. So not getting that record would have been very embarrassing. So I'm glad we were able to pull it off.
Not embarrassed. You got the certificate. Done and done.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Right. Thank you.
Well, Lou, I have at the end of our episodes the unfortunate mark of bringing us to a close, but this has been a great episode. I enjoyed the conversation. I'd like to do it again sometime. That would be great. I think there's a few other areas that we could touch, but as I do at the end of all our episodes, is there somebody from your network that you believe our network and our audience would benefit from hearing from?
Absolutely. The name that comes to mind is Irving Washington. Irving is a member of the ASA Fellows Class 2019, along with me and Steve Stout, Michelle Mills-Clement, Charlie Jones, Sue Pine. We are the best fellows class in ASA history. That's maybe another fun fact for everyone out there. So, but he's an amazing, totally objective. Every time I talk to Irving, I learn something. He is at the Kaiser Family Foundation and is doing some really incredible work. He used to be the executive director of the Online News Association. But somebody who, anytime you talk to him, you'll benefit from. So certainly the audience here, I'm sure, would love hearing from him.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the time and for the recommendation, Lou. And we just really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucas. Enjoyed it. Look forward to talking again soon.